Hey, welcome back. You're watching Impossible Color. Today's video is another in the before and after series. So I'm just looking at my portrait in Adobe Camera Raw, and this is the before straight out of camera, and this is the after that we did just in this program. I also made a completely separate adjustment here that I'm going to be using just for the background. And I also did another snapshot of just the dress. And if I turn the original and the dress, you can see that the dress has more details. And the exposure for the after is pretty good throughout the image, but I'm losing a little bit in the highlights there. And that's why I did a separate exposure for it. So let's open this up in Photoshop. This is my PSD file. You can see the before and the after. Quite a dramatic change with this one. And this one's a little bit more detailed than the last in the series, so we'll go through this step by step. Let's make all those layers hidden. So one of the first things that I did was I did a level adjustment to darken the background. And then I did another one that included the background and a little bit of this log as well. Then I brought in that background adjustment that you saw in Adobe Camera Raw that was slightly more bluish. I chose the blue tones to kind of just help that background recede and keep the subject a little bit warmer and more in the foreground. Then I did a color adjustment layer. It's pretty subtle, but it does give it some extra richness. And that was kind of my global level color adjustments. And then I went with selective color, chose each color individually and adjusted them. So if I turn both of those off, you can see slowly transforming. But with that change, I felt the blue was getting a little bit too saturated. So I made just a desaturation layer adjustment, just to tone that back a little bit. Then we brought in the dress, and you can see this is the separate exposure for the dress that I was talking about before. Now for that layer, you don't need to paste it in and try to get it to match up and blend it and everything. You just have to bring it in and set it to luminosity. So all the colors are automatically going to match up, and it's really just the tones that you have to be concerned about. So there was kind of the secondary complementary color for this image, this kind of orangey red that's in this unique wreath that was made out of seaweed for her hair, and that is a nice complement to the blues of the background. But I really felt that that had to be repeated somewhere else in the image, and the closest area to that I could think of was some of the reddish oranges in this log down here. So I made a separate adjustment here where I just isolated some of those reddy oranges and did a selective color on them. You can see that I took out some cyan and added some yellow. So that just intensified that a little bit. You'll notice that each of these adjustments, I use these masks quite a bit. And if let's say I do control and click on it, you can see the areas that are being affected. Or if I hold down Alt, you can see a nice clear preview. Took quite a bit of work to get this all isolated, but I was able to use it in an awful lot of these layers in various forms, whether I used the entire thing, or I used part of it, or I inverted it. What I do sometimes is I go into image adjust and I do a run through the autos, and I kind of see this as a guy over my shoulder that's just double checking things. Sometimes you get working on these images for a long time and you get down a track of colors and you start to lose the big picture. So I often just go in there and do a check and see if I'm skewing towards a certain direction a little bit too much. And it was clear that I was going a little bit too dark in the background, and some of my colors were not quite where I wanted them to be. So the next step that I did was I did my skin adjustments. So I just did a lot of spot treatment. One of my favorite tools for doing that is the spot healing brush tool. I'm going to turn on this other group. And you can see, it's hard to tell from a distance what's actually going on there. So I'm going to zoom in and do a before and after. There's quite a bit happening there, so let's go through that step by step. So the first thing I did was a noise reduction. Then I did a high pass filter based on the original. I did a separate high pass, and you can see that the high pass is isolated to my subject here. I'm not sharpening all this stuff in the background because it really doesn't help the image at all. Then I did a levels adjustment. It just kind of brightens everything up a little bit because we lost some of that in these other steps. And then I did a burn layer. I just wanted to define those eyebrows a little bit more and some other features in the face by giving a little bit of shadow under the lip. Just help that pop a little bit. I thought I was done at this point, but I felt like this log was just getting too much attention. So I just did a little bit of a darken on it. And you can see the mask just isolated that change. Then just to create a cozier feel, I did a vignette just to draw that focus right into the model at the center. And you can see for some of these layers I turned down the opacity where I just don't want the full effect. So here is the before and the after. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more in this series, please let me know. If you have other ideas for new videos coming up, I'd love to hear them. And as always, please subscribe. See you next time.